Elena wiped down the last table in her section, her feet aching from another 12-hour shift. The Grand Meridian restaurant was finally empty, except for the kitchen staff finishing up in the back. She glanced at the clock on the wall. Nearly midnight. Again. This had been her life for the past 5 years. Wake up, go to work, smile at customers, take orders, serve food, collect tips, go home, sleep, and do it all over again. Most people who worked at the Grand Meridian were just passing through, waiting for something better to come along. But for Elena, this was it. This was her reality, and she had made peace with it. Well, mostly. She folded her cleaning cloth and tucked it into her apron pocket, letting her eyes wander around the elegant dining room. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft light across white tablecloths and polished silverware. Everything here spoke of wealth and luxury, the kind of place where a single meal could cost more than she made in a week. And then there was the piano. It sat in the corner of the main dining room, a beautiful black grand piano that gleamed under the lights. Nobody played it anymore. The restaurant used to hire a pianist on weekends, but that had stopped months ago, when the owner decided recorded music was cheaper. Now it just sat there, taking up space, collecting dust. Elena looked away quickly, the way she always did. That piano represented everything she used to be and everything she had lost. 5 years ago, she couldn't have imagined a life without music. Now she couldn't imagine a life with it. "Hey, Elena, you heading out?" called Rico, one of the kitchen staff, poking his head through the service door. "Yeah, just finished up," she replied, forcing a smile. "Another double tomorrow?" "You know it." Rico shook his head. "Girl, you work too hard. When's the last time you took a day off?" Elena grabbed her worn leather bag from behind the host stand. "Days off don't pay the bills, Rico. Besides, someone's got to keep this place running smoothly." She said it as a joke, but there was truth in it. Elena had become one of the most reliable servers at the Grand Meridian. She never called in sick, never showed up late, and never complained about difficult customers. The manager loved her. The other servers respected her. The regular customers requested her section, but none of them knew her story. None of them knew that the woman serving their expensive wine and gourmet meals had once played piano at Carnegie Hall as a student performer. None of them knew she had graduated top of her class from one of the country's best music conservatories. None of them knew that critics had called her a rising star and the next generation's virtuoso. And none of them knew why she had walked away from all of it. The night air hit her face as she stepped outside, cool and refreshing after the warmth of the restaurant. The city was quieter at this hour, but never truly silent. Cars still moved through the streets. People still walked the sidewalks. Life continued, indifferent to whether you were living your dreams or just surviving. Elena pulled her jacket tighter and started the 15-minute walk to her apartment. She could have taken the bus, but she preferred walking after long shifts. It gave her time to think, or more often, time to deliberately not think about certain things. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her younger brother, Daniel. "Got an A on my chemistry exam. Thanks for believing in me, sis." Elena smiled, a real one this time. This was why she did it. This was why the double shifts and the aching feet and the giving up of her own dreams mattered. Daniel was in his 3rd year of college, studying to become a doctor. Their parents would have been so proud. Their parents, Elena's chest tightened the way it always did when she thought about them. The car accident had happened 6 years ago, sudden and senseless. One moment her family had been whole, planning her professional debut concert, talking about her future, celebrating her success. The next moment, she and Daniel were orphans. She was 23 then, Daniel was 17. She had become his guardian overnight, responsible for raising a teenager while grieving her own loss and trying to maintain her grueling practice schedule at the conservatory. Something had to give. The first panic attack happened during a recital 3 months after the funeral. She had been playing Rachmaninoff, a piece she could perform in her sleep. But halfway through, her hands started shaking. Her breathing became shallow. The notes on the page blurred together. She had pushed through it, finished the piece, and walked off stage to polite applause, but she knew. Something had broken inside her. The panic attacks got worse. Every time she sat at a piano to practice, anxiety would creep up her spine. Her heart would race. Her hands would sweat. The music that had once been her safe place, her joy, her entire identity, had become the source of her greatest fear. Her teachers tried to help. They suggested therapy, medication, breathing exercises, taking a break. But Daniel needed stability. He needed food and shelter and someone to help him with homework and make sure he didn't fall apart after losing his parents. He needed his sister to be strong, so Elena made a choice. She dropped out of the conservatory 2 months before graduation. She got a job at the Grand Meridian, where the pay was decent and the tips were good. She focused all her energy on keeping Daniel on track, making sure he could still go to college, giving him the future their parents had wanted for him, and she stopped playing piano completely. Now 5 years later, Daniel was thriving. He had a full scholarship, good grades, and a bright future ahead of him. The sacrifice had been worth it. Elena told herself this every single day. Her apartment was small but clean, a one-bedroom place where she slept on the couch so Daniel could have the bedroom during his breaks from school. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto that couch, too tired to even change out of her work clothes. Her bag had fallen open, and she could see the stack of tips from tonight. Mostly small bills, but they added up. She'd count them in the morning, add them to the jar in the kitchen where she kept Daniel's emergency fund. Just in case, Elena closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come easily. It never did after double shifts. Her mind was too wired, her body too exhausted, caught in that frustrating space between the two. In the darkness, she could hear music. Not real music, but the memory of it. Melodies she used to play, pieces she used to love, the sound of applause after a perfect performance. These memories visited her most nights, unwanted guests in her tired mind. She used to be someone with a future, with potential, with dreams that reached beyond serving other people's meals. But that person was gone now. That life was over. Tomorrow she would wake up and do it all again. Another shift, another day of smiling and serving and pretending that this was enough, because it had to be enough. Daniel needed her to be okay, so she was okay. Even if she had to lie to herself to make it true. The piano in the corner of the Grand Meridian would sit there tomorrow, just like it did every day. And Elena would walk past it without looking, just like she always did. Some doors once closed were better left that way. At least that's what she kept telling herself. The Grand Meridian was buzzing with energy that Saturday evening. Elena had worked plenty of busy nights before, but this was different. The entire restaurant had been reserved for a private charity gala, the kind of event where women wore gowns that cost more than a car, and men checked their stock portfolios between courses. Elena adjusted her pristine white shirt and black vest, making sure everything was perfect. Events like this meant serious tips, and she needed every dollar she could get. Daniel's textbooks for next semester weren't going to pay for themselves. "Remember, people," called out Mr. Peterson, the restaurant manager, clapping his hands to get everyone's attention. "These are very important guests tonight. We're talking CEOs, investors, politicians. Everything needs to be flawless." "Understood?" The staff nodded in unison. Elena had worked for Mr. Peterson for 5 years, and she'd never seen him this nervous. His forehead was actually sweating, and he kept adjusting his tie every few minutes. "The host for tonight's event is someone very special," Mr. Peterson continued, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Vincent Crawford." The Vincent Crawford. A few of the younger servers looked confused, but Elena knew the name. Everyone did. Vincent Crawford had built a tech empire from nothing, turning a simple app idea into a billion-dollar company. His face had been on magazine covers, business shows, podcasts. He was the kind of person who made headlines just by showing up somewhere. "He's extremely particular," Mr. Peterson warned. "Everything must be perfect." "Not good, perfect." Elena took a deep breath. Perfect she could do. Perfect was her specialty. The guests started arriving at 7, and Elena's section filled up quickly. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, balancing trays, refilling glasses, remembering faces and drink orders without writing anything down. This was her element, the one place where she felt completely in control. Vincent Crawford arrived at 7:30, and the energy in the room shifted immediately. He was younger than Elena expected, maybe in his early 40s, with sharp features and an expensive suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. People gravitated toward him, eager to shake his hand, to be seen talking to him, to exist in his orbit for even a moment. Elena served his table with the same professional courtesy she gave everyone, though she noticed something about him right away. He didn't say please or thank you. He didn't make eye contact with the staff. When he wanted something, he simply stated it as if talking to furniture. Water. No ice. Move that centerpiece. It's blocking my view. The temperature in here is too warm. Mr. Peterson practically tripped over himself trying to accommodate every demand. Elena had seen this before. People so used to getting what they wanted that they forgot basic manners. She didn't judge. She just did her job and collected her tips. The evening was going smoothly until about 9 o'clock. That's when Mr. Peterson's phone rang, and Elena watched his face go pale as he listened to whoever was on the other end. He hung up and immediately looked around the room with panic in his eyes. He spotted Elena and rushed over, grabbing her arm a bit too tightly. "We have a problem," he whispered urgently. "The pianist. The one scheduled to play during dinner. He's stuck in traffic from the airport. Some kind of accident on the highway. He's not going to make it." Elena's stomach dropped, though she wasn't sure why. This wasn't her problem. "Can we just play the recorded music?" she suggested. No. Mr. Crawford specifically requested live piano music. He was very clear about this. Very clear. Mr. Peterson's voice was getting higher with each word. If he doesn't get what he wants, he'll never host an event here again. He'll probably leave a terrible review online. We could lose everything. "I'm sure we can figure something out," Elena said, trying to calm him down. Though her own heart was starting to beat faster, Mr. Peterson looked around desperately. Then his eyes landed on the piano in the corner. Then they landed back on Elena. And suddenly she knew exactly where this was going. "No," she said immediately, taking a step back. "Absolutely not. Elena, please. I know you studied music. You mentioned it once when you first started working here. I mentioned it 5 years ago. I don't play anymore. But you know how. You can play. That's all we need. Just some background music. Nothing fancy, please." His eyes were actually watering now. "I'm begging you. My job is on the line here." Elena felt trapped. She looked at the piano, that beautiful instrument that she'd been avoiding for 5 years. Just looking at it made her hands start to sweat. "Mr. Peterson, I can't. You don't understand. I don't play in public anymore. I haven't touched a piano in years. It's just background music," he pleaded. "These people aren't even paying attention. They're too busy talking and eating. Just play something soft, anything. Please, Elena, you're the only person here who can help me." She wanted to say no. Every fiber of her being was screaming at her to walk away, to refuse, to protect herself from the panic attack she knew would come if she sat down at that bench. But Mr. Peterson had been good to her. He'd given her extra shifts when she needed them, had been flexible when Daniel needed help, had never questioned her work ethic, and she needed this job. "Fine," she heard herself say, the word barely above a whisper. But just simple stuff, and only for a little while. Mr. Peterson's face flooded with relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver." Elena's hands were already shaking as she made her way toward the piano. A few guests glanced at her, but most ignored her completely, too absorbed in their conversations and their expensive meals. She was just part of the background, another element of the ambiance they'd paid for. She sat down on the bench, and the familiar smell hit her immediately. Wood polish and old ivory, the scent of every practice room she'd ever spent hours in, every concert hall she'd ever performed in, every dream she'd ever had. Her fingers touched the keys, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. The last time she'd sat at a piano like this, she'd had a panic attack so severe she thought she was dying. Her vision had gone dark around the edges. Her chest had felt like someone was standing on it. The music had turned into noise, terrible and overwhelming. "Just play," she whispered to herself. "You can do this. It's just background music. Nobody's even listening." She started with something simple, a basic classical piece that every piano student learned. Her fingers felt stiff and unpracticed, stumbling over keys that used to feel like extensions of her own body. But the notes came out, soft and tentative, filling the space between conversations. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. She was invisible, exactly as Mr. Peterson had said she would be. Elena relaxed slightly and moved into another piece, something a bit more complex. Her muscle memory started to kick in, her fingers finding patterns they'd practiced thousands of times. It had been 5 years, but apparently her hands still remembered what her mind had tried to forget. She played for about 20 minutes, working through a mental catalog of simple, pleasant pieces. Her anxiety was still there, hovering at the edges, but it was manageable. Nobody was watching her, Nobody was judging her. She was just making sound, filling space, doing a job. Then Vincent Crawford's voice cut through the gentle music like a knife. "This is boring." Elena's hands froze on the keys. The room seemed to go quiet, though people were still talking. Vincent was looking directly at her for the first time all evening, his expression one of casual disappointment, like someone who'd ordered a steak and received a hamburger instead. "Sir?" Mr. Peterson rushed over, his face panicked again. "The music. It's boring. Generic, the kind of thing you'd hear in an elevator." Vincent waved his hand dismissively. "I paid for a premium experience, and this is what you give me?" Elena felt her chest tighten. The anxiety that had been lurking at the edges came rushing in like a wave. "I apologize, Mr. Crawford," Mr. Peterson stammered. "Our regular pianist couldn't make it. This is just temporary. Then get someone better, or have her play something better." Vincent looked at Elena again, and this time his gaze felt like a spotlight, hot and exposing. "Can you actually play, or do you only know elevator music?" The question hung in the air. Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Vincent pulled out his wallet and removed a $100 bill, placing it on the piano's edge with the casual arrogance of someone who thought money could buy anything. "Play something impressive," he said. "Something worthy of this event. That's what I'm paying for." Elena stared at the money, then at Vincent, then at Mr. Peterson, who was giving her a pleading look. Every instinct told her to stand up, walk away, refuse this humiliation. But she also saw the fear in her manager's eyes, thought about the bills waiting at home, remembered Daniel's tuition payment coming due. She was trapped. Completely and utterly trapped. And the worst part was, Vincent Crawford had no idea what he'd just done. To him, she was just hired help who needed to do her job better. He had no idea he'd just forced someone to face their greatest fear, in front of a room full of strangers, for the price of a $100 bill. Elena's hands returned to the keys, trembling now, her breath shallow. The panic attack was coming. She could feel it building just like it had 5 years ago. But she had to play. She had no choice. Elena's fingers rested on the keys, trembling. The $100 bill sat on the edge of the piano like an insult wrapped in green paper. Around her, the wealthy guests continued their conversations, completely unaware that her entire world was collapsing in on itself. She could feel it starting. The tightness in her chest, the shallow breathing, the way the room seemed to tilt slightly to one side. This was exactly how it had begun 5 years ago, right before everything fell apart. "Play something impressive," he'd said. As if it were that simple. As if she could just decide to be impressive and make it happen. Elena closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. She thought about walking away, imagined herself standing up, removing her apron, and leaving the Grand Meridian forever. But then what? Daniel still needed her. The bills still needed to be paid. She couldn't afford pride. She'd given up that luxury a long time ago. Her hands moved to the keys again, and she started playing something safe. Chopin Nocturne in E-flat major. Beautiful, elegant, technically sound, the kind of piece that would satisfy most people. But not Vincent Crawford. Still boring. His voice cut through after less than a minute. "I've heard this 1,000 times. Play something with actual emotion. With fire. Or don't play at all." Something inside Elena snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion from working double shifts for 5 years straight. Maybe it was the accumulated weight of every dream she'd buried, every sacrifice she'd made. Every time she'd walked past that piano and forced herself not to look. Maybe it was simply that she'd reached the absolute limit of what one person could endure while staying polite. Whatever it was, the fear that had been building suddenly transformed into something else entirely. Anger. Pure, white-hot anger. Who was this man to judge her? This man who treated people like furniture, who threw money around like it made him important, who had no idea what it cost her just to sit on this bench. He wanted emotion. He wanted fire? Fine, she'd give him fire. Elena's hands crashed down on the keys, not with the gentle touch of background music, but with force. She launched into Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, one of the most intense pieces in the classical repertoire. It was the same piece she'd been playing 5 years ago when her world fell apart. The same piece that had haunted her nightmares ever since. But this time was different. This time she wasn't playing for approval or grades or critics or even for herself. She was playing because someone had pushed her too far, and this was the only way she knew how to push back. Her fingers flew across the keys with a precision she didn't know she still possessed. 5 years of not practicing should have made her rusty, should have made her clumsy, but apparently some things live deeper than memory. They lived in the muscles, in the bones, in parts of you that never really forgot even when you desperately wanted them to. The music poured out of her, dark and powerful and full of everything she'd been holding inside for 5 years. Every sleepless night, every time she'd smiled at a rude customer, every moment she'd watched other people live the dreams she'd abandoned, every single tear she'd cried in the shower so Daniel wouldn't hear. It was all there in the music, raw and unfiltered. Around her, the conversations began to stop. One by one, the wealthy guests turned to look at what was happening in the corner of the room. The waitress who'd been invisible moments ago was suddenly very, very visible. Elena didn't notice. She was somewhere else entirely. Lost in the music, her eyes closed, her whole body moving with the piece. The panic attack that had been building never came. There was no room for it. The anger had burned it away, and in its place was something she'd forgotten she was capable of feeling. Freedom. The piece built to its climactic moment, and Elena hit every note with absolute certainty, her hands moving so fast they were almost a blur. This wasn't elevator music. This wasn't background ambiance. This was the sound of 5 years of silence breaking open all at once. When she played the final crashing chord, the sound echoed through the restaurant for a long moment before fading into complete, total silence. Elena opened her eyes slowly, her hands still resting on the keys, her chest heaving from the exertion. For a second, she couldn't remember where she was. Then reality came rushing back. The entire room was staring at her. Every single person had stopped what they were doing. Forks were suspended halfway to mouths. Wine glasses sat forgotten on tables. Even the other servers had stopped moving, frozen in place with trays balanced on their hands. Elena's face flushed hot. The anger drained away in an instant, replaced by mortification. What had she done? She'd made a scene. She'd drawn attention to herself. She'd probably gotten herself fired. Then someone started clapping. It was an older woman in an elegant blue dress sitting near the front. She was standing up, applauding with genuine enthusiasm, tears visibly streaming down her face. Then another person joined in. And another. Within seconds, the entire room had erupted into applause, the kind of thunderous, sustained applause that Elena hadn't heard since her conservatory days. People were standing up. Some were wiping their eyes. Others were simply staring at her with expressions of shock and awe, as if they couldn't quite believe what they'd just witnessed. Elena sat frozen on the piano bench, completely overwhelmed. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Through the crowd, she saw Vincent Crawford. He wasn't clapping. He was just standing there, his face completely transformed from the arrogant expression he'd worn all evening. He looked stunned, maybe even ashamed. An elderly man with silver hair pushed through the crowd toward the piano. Elena recognized him vaguely, though she couldn't place from where. He was moving quickly for someone his age, his eyes bright with excitement. "My God," he said, reaching the piano and looking at Elena like she was a ghost. "My God, it's you." "It's actually you." Elena blinked at him, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "You don't remember me." "Why would you?" "It was years ago. But I remember you." He was practically vibrating with energy. "Elena Martinez. You performed at the National Young Musicians Competition 6 years ago. I was one of the judges. You played Chopin and you were magnificent. We all agreed you were destined for greatness, and then you just disappeared." The memory came flooding back. The competition had been one of her last performances before her parents died, before everything changed. "Professor Chen," she said quietly, finally placing his face. "Yes, yes." He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying across the room. "Do you people realize who this is? This woman was one of the most promising young pianists in the country. I personally wrote a recommendation letter for her to study in Vienna. Every major music school wanted her. And for 5 years I've wondered what happened to her. Where did you go?" Elena's throat tightened. Everyone was looking at her, waiting for an answer. The applause had died down, replaced by an expectant silence. My parents passed away," she said, her voice barely audible. "I had to take care of my brother. I couldn't—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't explain how dreams became luxuries when you were trying to keep a family from falling apart. Professor Chen's expression softened with understanding and sadness. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Nobody did, Elena said. I stopped playing. It was easier that way. Easier. Professor Chen shook his head. My dear, you have a gift. What you just played with 5 years of not practicing, with no preparation, in the middle of a restaurant. Most concert pianists couldn't do what you just did. That kind of talent doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. A woman in an expensive red dress stepped forward. I'm Rebecca Walsh. I run the Harmony Foundation. We provide scholarships for music students and support young artists. I would love to talk to you about opportunities. Another man joined in. Thomas Gardner. I manage the Metropolitan Chamber Orchestra. We're always looking for talented soloists. More people crowded around, all talking at once, offering business cards and opportunities and praise. Elena felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. 5 minutes ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was drowning in possibility. Through the crowd, she caught sight of Mr. Peterson. Her manager was standing near the kitchen door, his mouth hanging open in shock, clearly having no idea that his waitress had this kind of talent. And beyond him, still standing alone, was Vincent Crawford. He was watching the whole scene unfold with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. He looked smaller somehow, less imposing than he had an hour ago. When their eyes met across the room, he did something she never expected. He looked away first, almost as if he was embarrassed. The anger Elena had felt toward him began to fade, replaced by something more complicated. He'd humiliated her, yes. He'd pushed her into her worst nightmare. But he'd also accidentally given her something she'd lost 5 years ago. He'd reminded her who she used to be. And now, standing in the middle of this crowd with her hands still shaking and her heart still racing, Elena had no idea what to do with that gift. Professor Chen was still talking, making plans, suggesting concerts and competitions. The other guests were listening, adding their own ideas, treating Elena like she was someone important, someone whose future mattered. But all Elena could think about was Daniel. Her brother was graduating next year. After that, he wouldn't need her in the same way. For the first time in 5 years, she could glimpse a future where she might have room for her own dreams again. The question was, did she have the courage to try, or would the fear come back the moment she stepped away from the anger that had carried her through tonight? She didn't know the answer. But as the crowd continued to talk and plan around her, Elena realized something important. For the first time in 5 years, she actually wanted to find out. Elena barely slept that night. She lay on her couch staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying everything that had happened. The anger, the music, the applause, the business cards now sitting in a pile on her kitchen counter. 23 business cards from people who wanted to help her, hire her, support her. It felt like a dream. Or a trap. She couldn't decide which. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Another text from Daniel, who she'd finally told about the evening around 2 in the morning when she couldn't hold it in anymore. This is amazing, Elena. This is your chance. You have to take it. Easy for him to say. He was 22 and still believed the world made sense, that talent and hard work guaranteed success, that second chances were real things that actually happened to people. Elena knew better. She'd learned that dreams were expensive and someone always had to pay the bill. She got up and made coffee, watching the sun rise through her small apartment window. In a few hours, she had another shift at the Grand Meridian. Life didn't stop just because you had one magical moment. Bills didn't pause. Rent didn't forgive itself. But when she arrived at work that afternoon, everything felt different. The other servers looked at her with new eyes, whispering to each other when they thought she couldn't hear. Mr. Peterson actually pulled her aside before her shift started, his expression a strange mixture of respect and confusion. Elena, I had no idea. All these years you've been working here, and I had no idea you could play like that. It was a long time ago, she said, not sure what else to say. Well, Mr. Crawford's people called this morning. They want to speak with you. He left his personal assistant's number. Mr. Peterson handed her a slip of paper with a phone number written in neat handwriting. Elena stared at it. Why would he want to speak with me? I don't know, but when Vincent Crawford wants to talk to you, you take the call. Mr. Peterson looked at her seriously. Whatever happened last night, Elena, it was extraordinary. Don't let it slip away. Elena tucked the number into her pocket and went to work, but she couldn't focus. She mixed up orders for the first time in years. She forgot which table had asked for extra napkins. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. During her break, she finally called the number. A professional-sounding woman answered on the second ring. Martinez residence, how can I help you? This is Elena Martinez. I was told to call this number? Oh yes, Elena. Mr. Crawford has been expecting your call. Please hold. Before Elena could protest, the line clicked, and then Vincent Crawford's voice came through, clearer than she expected. Elena, thank you for calling. His tone was completely different from the night before, quieter, almost uncertain. It threw her off balance. Your assistant said you wanted to speak with me? Yes, I wanted to apologize. In person, if you're willing. Are you free this evening after your shift? Elena hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, to keep her distance from this man who'd humiliated her in front of a room full of people. But curiosity won out. I get off at 9. I'll send a car. There's something I want to show you, and some things I need to say. The call ended before she could ask any questions. The car that picked her up at 9 was absurdly fancy, the kind with leather seats and a silent driver who didn't ask questions. It drove her to a part of the city she'd never been to, where the buildings were taller and everything looked more expensive. They pulled up to a modern glass building, and the driver opened her door. Mr. Crawford is waiting on the 20th floor. Elena rode the elevator up, her stomach doing nervous flips. What was she doing here? This was crazy. She should have said no. The elevator doors opened directly into a penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and there, in the middle of the massive living room, sat a beautiful grand piano. Vincent stood near the windows, dressed more casually than the night before. When he turned to face her, he looked tired. Thank you for coming, he said. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either, Elena admitted. He gestured to the piano. Do you know what that is? A Steinway Model D concert grand. Probably worth more than I'll make in 10 years. 15 years, actually. It belonged to my mother. Vincent walked toward the piano, running his hand along its polished surface. She was a pianist. Not professionally, but she loved it more than anything. She used to play for me every night before bed when I was a kid. Elena didn't know what to say, so she stayed quiet. She died when I was 14, cancer. After she was gone, I couldn't stand to hear anyone play this piano. It sat silent for years. Eventually, I had it moved here, but I still never let anyone touch it. It just sits here taking up space, reminding me of what I lost. He looked at Elena directly for the first time. Last night, when you played, it was the first time in 26 years that I heard piano music and didn't feel pain. I felt something else, something I'd forgotten was possible. Elena's throat tightened. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected him to be human. That doesn't excuse how I treated you, Vincent continued. I was arrogant and dismissive. I treated you like you were nothing, and that was wrong. You deserved better. Everyone deserves better than the way I've been treating people. Why are you telling me this? Elena asked. Because I've spent the last 24 hours thinking about what Professor Chen said, about how you disappeared, how you gave up something you loved, and I realized I'm part of the problem. People like me, we walk through the world taking what we want, pushing people around, never stopping to think about what it costs them. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and held it out to her. I can't give you back the years you lost, but I can try to help you move forward if you want to. Elena took the envelope carefully, opened it. Inside was a check. Her eyes widened when she saw the amount. $50,000. I don't understand, she said. It's not charity. Think of it as an investment. Professor Chen told me about your brother, about his medical school plans. This should cover his expenses for the next year, which means you wouldn't have to work double shifts anymore. You could have time to practice, to perform, to decide if music is something you want in your life again. Elena stared at the check, her hands shaking. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I don't take money from strangers. Because this feels like you're trying to buy forgiveness. Because I don't need to be saved. Vincent nodded slowly. You're right. You don't need to be saved. But everyone needs help sometimes. I'm offering help. Not because I think you're weak, but because I think you're extraordinary. And the world needs extraordinary people to have a chance. You don't even know me. No, but I know talent when I see it. And I know regret. I've lived with it for 26 years. He gestured to the silent piano. Don't let fear or pride or circumstances steal another 5 years from you. Take the help, use it, and then when you're successful, help someone else. Elena looked at the check again, then at the piano, then at Vincent. This man who'd been so cruel last night was offering her freedom. It felt too good to be true. "There's no catch?" she asked suspiciously. "No catch. Though I do have one request, if you're willing." "What?" "Play something. Here now on my mother's piano. Let it hear music again." Elena walked slowly to the piano and sat down on the bench. The instrument was even more beautiful up close, clearly maintained with expert care despite years of silence. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Not Rachmaninoff this time, something gentler. Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece her mother used to love. The piano's tone was perfect, resonant, and clear. As she played, Elena watched Vincent from the corner of her eye. He had moved to sit on the couch, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking slightly. He was crying, she realized. Quietly, trying to hide it, but crying nonetheless. When she finished, the silence felt different than it had the night before. Not heavy with judgment, but soft with possibility. "Thank you," Vincent said quietly, wiping his eyes. "That's the first time this apartment has felt like a home in a very long time." Elena stood up from the piano, carefully folding the check and putting it in her pocket. She still wasn't sure if she'd cash it, but she was willing to think about it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why do you keep it?" "The piano? If it causes you pain, why not sell it?" Vincent looked at the instrument with something like fondness. "Because some pain is worth keeping. It reminds me that I loved someone once, that I was capable of feeling something other than ambition and pride. I needed that reminder, especially last night." They stood there for a moment. Two people who'd been brought together by chance and cruelty and music, both of them carrying losses too heavy to name but somehow lighter for having shared them. "I should go," Elena said finally. "The driver will take you home. And Elena, whatever you decide about the money, about music, about any of it, I hope you choose what makes you happy, not what makes other people comfortable." On the ride home, Elena held the check in her hands and thought about choices, about the difference between giving up and letting go, about how sometimes the things that hurt us the most are also the things that remind us we're alive. She didn't know yet what she would do, but for the first time in 5 years, she felt like the choice was actually hers to make. And that, in itself, felt like freedom. Elena stared at the check for 3 days before she did anything with it. It sat on her kitchen counter, $50,000 written in neat handwriting, representing a future she'd stopped believing in. Part of her wanted to tear it up to prove she didn't need anyone's help. Another part wanted to cash it immediately, to feel what it was like to breathe without the constant weight of money problems crushing her chest. In the end, Daniel made the decision for her. He came home from college for the weekend and saw the check sitting there. When Elena explained everything that had happened, he just looked at her with those eyes that were so much like their mother's and said, "You've been taking care of me for 5 years. Let someone take care of you for once." So she cashed it. The first thing she did was quit her double shifts. Not quit her job entirely, she wasn't ready for that, but she cut back to normal hours, 4 shifts a week instead of 7. Mr. Peterson understood, especially after she explained that she needed time to figure some things out. The second thing she did was call Professor Chen. They met at a small cafe near the university where he still taught. He looked older than she remembered, more gray in his hair, but his eyes still had that same intense spark when he talked about music. "I don't know if I can do this," Elena admitted after they'd ordered coffee. "It's been 5 years. I'm not the same person I was." "Good," Professor Chen said simply. "That person was talented but fragile. You're stronger now. You've lived through things that would have broken most people. That strength will make your music better, not worse. But what if the panic attacks come back? What if I freeze up again? Then you freeze up, and then you unfreeze, and you keep going." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Elena, perfection is not the goal. Connection is the goal. When you played that night at the restaurant, you weren't perfect. You were angry and scared and raw, and that's exactly why it was brilliant. You let people see something real." Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, absorbing his words. "I want to help you," Professor Chen continued. "Not train you like you're starting over, but help you remember who you are. If you're willing." She was willing. They started slowly. 3 times a week, Elena would go to the university music building after her shifts and practice in one of the small rehearsal rooms. Professor Chen would stop by sometimes, offer gentle guidance, but mostly he just let her play. The first few sessions were terrible. Her fingers stumbled. Her timing was off. She got frustrated and wanted to quit at least a dozen times. But she kept showing up, kept pushing through, kept remembering what it felt like that night when anger had burned away her fear. Slowly, gradually, the music started coming back to her. Not the same way it had before, when everything was about technical precision and impressing judges. This time it felt different, more honest. Like she was playing for herself instead of for some invisible audience's approval. Daniel came to listen sometimes, doing his homework in the corner while she practiced. "You sound happy," he said one evening, and Elena realized he was right. She was happy. Not perfectly happy, not without doubts or fears, but genuinely, messily, complicatedly happy. 2 months after that night at the Grand Meridian, Professor Chen approached her with an opportunity. "There's a small charity concert next month. Local musicians, intimate venue, maybe 100 people. They need a pianist. No pressure, low stakes, but it would be good for you to perform in front of people again." Elena's immediate instinct was to say no, but she'd been working on recognizing that instinct and questioning it instead of automatically obeying it. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Elena, I think you're ready. More importantly, I think you want to be ready." He was right. She did want to be ready. She was tired of being afraid. She called Vincent that evening. They'd been in occasional contact over the past 2 months, mostly text messages, him checking in to see how she was doing, her updating him on her progress. It felt strange having a billionaire as something like a friend, but their shared experience that night had created an odd bond between them. "I'm going to perform," she told him. "A small concert. I'm terrified, but I'm going to do it." "That's wonderful," Vincent said, and she could hear genuine warmth in his voice. "I'd like to be there if that's okay. I promise to sit in the back and not make any demands about the music selection." Elena laughed. "You can come, but you're bringing your mother's piano." There was a pause on the other end. "What?" "That Steinway has been silent for 26 years. It deserves to be heard by more than just the two of us. Let it be part of something beautiful again." Vincent's voice was thick when he responded, "I'll have it delivered wherever you need it." The night of the concert arrived faster than Elena expected. The venue was small, just a community arts center with folding chairs and basic lighting. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would have impressed her younger self who'd once dreamed of concert halls and international stages. But it was perfect. Daniel sat in the front row, along with Rico from the restaurant and a few other co-workers who'd become real friends over the years. Professor Chen was there with some of his students. Vincent sat in the back like he'd promised, dressed simply, trying not to draw attention. And in the center of the small stage sat the Steinway, polished and ready, waiting to sing again. Elena stood backstage, her hands shaking, her heart racing. The panic was there, hovering at the edges. But so was something else. Excitement, anticipation, the memory of how good it felt to let the music pour out of her without holding back. When they announced her name, she walked onto the stage. The applause was warm but quiet, nothing like the shocked ovation at the Grand Meridian. These were just regular people who'd bought $10 tickets to support local arts. Elena sat at the piano and looked out at the small audience. She saw Daniel's encouraging smile, saw Professor Chen's slight nod, saw Vincent sitting very still, his hands folded in his lap. "I haven't performed in public in 5 years," she said, surprising herself by speaking. "I gave up music because I was afraid. Afraid I wasn't good enough. Afraid of failing, afraid of wanting something I couldn't have. Someone recently reminded me that perfection isn't the goal. Connection is. So tonight I'm not going to play perfectly. I'm just going to play honestly. And I hope that's enough." She placed her hands on the keys. The first notes came out soft and tentative but steady. She'd chosen Schumann's Scenes from Childhood, pieces that were both technically simple and emotionally deep. Music about memory and loss and growing up and finding your way home. As she played, Elena felt something shift inside her. The anxiety was still there, but it didn't control her anymore. It was just another feeling, like happiness or sadness or anger, something she could acknowledge and then choose to move past. She thought about her parents and how proud they would have been to see her here. Not because she was performing in some prestigious venue, but because she'd survived, because she'd taken care of her brother, because she'd found her way back to music on her own terms. She thought about Vincent's mother, and how this piano had been silent for so long, waiting for someone to love it again. She thought about herself, about the girl who'd been so afraid of imperfection that she'd given up entirely, and the woman she'd become who understood that imperfection was just another word for being human. The music flowed through her, and for the first time in 5 years, Elena wasn't playing to prove anything. She was playing because it felt good, because it was what she loved. Because life was short and uncertain, and sometimes the only thing you could do was create something beautiful in the middle of all that chaos. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the small audience began to applaud, standing up, their appreciation genuine and warm. Elena stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face, but smiling wider than she had in years. After the concert, people came up to talk to her. Some shared their own stories of giving up dreams and finding them again. Others just wanted to say the music had moved them. Daniel hugged her so tight she couldn't breathe, telling her over and over how proud he was. Vincent approached last, his eyes red like he'd been crying again. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting my mother's piano be part of this. She would have loved it." "Thank you for forcing me to play that night," Elena said. "Even though it was awful at the time, you gave me back something I'd lost." "We gave each other something," Vincent corrected gently. "You reminded me that wealth means nothing if you forget how to be human." 6 months later, Elena's life looked completely different, but also exactly the same. She still worked at the Grand Meridian, but only part-time now. She'd started teaching piano to kids in her neighborhood, discovering that she loved helping others find their voice in music. She performed occasionally, small venues mostly, but sometimes larger ones when the opportunity felt right. Daniel graduated and got accepted into an excellent medical school. Elena was there at his graduation, cheering louder than anyone, knowing that her sacrifice had been worth it even if it had cost her 5 years. The piano at the Grand Meridian got a new player, a young musician just starting out. But sometimes when the restaurant was closed and Elena was there late finishing her shift, Mr. Peterson would let her play for a little while. She'd sit at that piano where everything had changed, where anger and fear and 5 years of silence had transformed into something beautiful, and she'd play just for herself, not to prove she was talented, not to impress anyone, not to make up for lost time, just because the music was still there waiting inside her, and now she finally had the courage to let it out. And that, Elena had learned, was more than enough.